go ahead and get started today. Yat shikedo shidine she Corina Sabiku Yenishe Tachitni Nishle Hawathana Bashashin Tohoglini Dashache Ma Idishkijni Dashanele Akot Ego Dene Atsane Nishle. Good afternoon, my friends and relatives. My name is Corina Sabiku. I am from the Red Running Into the Water clan, born for the Minihogans. I am a senior research program coordinator under the Center for Health Equity and Community Engaged Research at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I'd like to welcome you all to the Indigenous Health Topics speaker series. As part of our center's Native American community outreach efforts to engage tribal health in Minnesota, we host this event, which is focused on hosting speakers who are local, regional, and national experts in health education and research. These presentations are focused on topics that have an impact on our Native American, Alaska Native communities. There will be opportunities to attend in person and virtually. All presentations are recorded and posted on our internal and external websites. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today to listen and learn. I want to go through a few housekeeping items. So we will have time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. If you do have any questions that come out throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop it in our Q&A or chat, and we will get to them at the end of our presentation. With all of that said, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. Rene Begay is Dine Navajo from Arizona. She is an Indigenous geneticist and public health researcher. She obtained her bachelor in science degree in biology from the University of Arizona and a master's in clinical science from the University of Colorado and Schutz Medical Campus and master's in public health from Johns Hopkins University. Currently, she is employed as a professional research assistant at the Centers for American Indian and Alaska Native Health at the University of Colorado School of Public Health. Some of her research interests are exploring cultural, clinical, ethical, legal, and social implications and concerns related to genomics research that includes Indigenous communities. Please welcome our guest speaker, Rene.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I will just start my screen and my presentation before I get started. So I just want to say thank you to Mayo and everyone involved in this to get me to this point of giving a presentation. I really appreciate it. So my talk today is reclaiming our genomes, inserting the Indigenous narrative. And of course, my name is Rene Begay. I am Navajo from the Navajo Nation. So I basically just introduced myself, my four clans, and these are the clans in English on your screen. I grew up in the place called Salina or Salina Springs, Arizona. And so this is actually a photo of where I'm from. And you know, we had really good rains during the summer one year, and some unique plants came out, and I took a background called Fish Point. And we're located within the Four Corners area in Southwest region of the United States. So I'll just kind of give a brief background of Indigenous history. This is not all encompassing. This is not super detailed. Obviously, it's important to continue to learn about this history because there's a lot of things that I'm skipping over. But there are 574 federally recognized tribes across 35 states, 334 reservations, and 229 villages located in Alaska. So we have a really interesting history, as you all may or may not know. We have the removal and reservation and treaty period in the early 1800s. Treaties were created in exchange for land. Allotment and assimilation happening where there was a continued diminishing of native land that natives could live on. And then in the Indian reorganization period, there was no more allotments provided for native people, but they're allowing natives to buy land and to take loans to help rehabilitate reservation land and resources. And then we're kind of in this period of this nation to nation period, where there's a lot of Indigenous self-governance going on, where we're becoming more educated. We have a lot more insights into the Western culture. We're not always residing on reservations. We're more, in urban areas for the most part, or we're pretty transient. I go home all the time, even though I live here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I go home to Arizona all the time. And so we're considered sovereign nations. We have a really unique structure set up where we interact with states, with the US government. We're able to kind of figure out what we want on our tribal lands as far as the economy, healthcare to a certain extent, how we manage our food systems and things like that. So we have every culture in Alaska, even in Alaska, have unique culture, language, traditions, government, social norms, and research priorities as well. And so this is just a figure of, sort of that triangle of like nation to nation relationship. So my objectives for this talk are just to kind of go over examples of genetics research that have happened with Native people, and then ethical genomics research framework, and sort of this movement, and telling a little bit about my background story as well. So a lot of Native people are underrepresented in genomics research. And I think many of you probably already know that, or you kind of, know some instances of that. But in 2009, there was a study that was published where 96% of genome-wide association studies included European descent individuals. And that's this figure here, but there was very few who were from non-European ancestry, so about 4%. And then cut to 2016, 19% of minorities were represented in these GWAS studies. However, Native Americans actually decreased as far as participation and inclusion in these GWAS studies. This inequity has left Indigenous people sort of out of the equation. It's left this huge gap where we're not getting comprehensive, genetic testing for Native people, incomplete reference panels, and precision medicine is pretty much not in our future because we're not really included in these projects. So additional factors that contribute to, further exclusion of Native people is money, right? It takes a lot of money to go out to rural areas or to urban areas or wherever, just to, recruit, include, and really engage properly and ethically with Native people. It takes time. It's not going to take, 5 years of a grant cycle. It's going to take probably 15, 30 years, whatever the time frame may be, depending on the group that you're working with. Geographic isolation, right? There's a lot of Native people who live in rural sectors of the US. The reservation doesn't have everything. It's not equipped with internet at every corner store. There's also this lack of access to quality healthcare. So why should Native people engage in genomics research, which have implications and benefits maybe 30 years down the road when, there's not even quality healthcare now in current day? So, what is the motivation for enrolling them in genomic studies? So large databases are already established. So why would researchers recruit additional individuals into a research study when there's already probably large databases that have been already accumulated over time and just want to get the research done, get funding, kind of move on, do some work in the area, but not really do the actual groundwork to recruit Native people. There's a huge distrust in the academic and medical community among Indigenous people, especially within the Indian Health Service. There's a lot of individuals who don't look like them, who are treating them and providing them care. And so there's been a lot of distrust in the past, and there's going to be a case that I'm talking about in a couple of slides. They're actually in the next slide as well. And so why should we trust academia? Why should we trust institutions like NIH? Why should we trust universities? Why should we trust the medical community when we have not seen benefits, when we have not seen the results come back to us? And then research findings leading to stigmatization or misuse. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides as well. But studying schizophrenia, studying inbreeding and those kinds of things, and labeling us in a certain way based on our genetics is one reason why, a lot of natives do not want to participate in genomics research. So one of the studies that I wanted to highlight was this study that was looking at rheumatoid arthritis in the New Chalnooth people. And this is where they're located here. Has about a population of 4,000 located on the west coast of Vancouver Island, northwest of Seattle, Washington. And in the 1980s, the group donated 800 or so samples to study, rheumatoid arthritis because it was running rampant throughout the community. However, this non-Indigenous researcher took those 800 samples and did not return any of the results to the people. It was years that had gone by, and this individual actually, posted into a newsletter and said, we participated, we didn't get anything back. Where is this researcher? Where is our samples? So they kind of went to the media to figure out what was going on. But the researcher in the meantime was traveling with samples to different universities. So they were no longer at that university that they originally collected the samples at, and then went to other universities or loaned out the samples to other fellow researchers, studied HIV and AIDS, drug abuse, ancestry, and did not just focus on arthritis. Published over 200 papers based on all of this. Samples were returned eventually. However, like I said, the tribe really had to go through all the different channels to figure out where is this researcher and what's going on. And the samples were eventually returned, but it took years to get through this process. And then the other study, which hopefully a lot of you know about already, which is the type 2 diabetes study that was done in Arizona. So a researcher, non-native, there were actually a couple of them that came from Arizona State University, and they actually wanted to go to the Havasupai tribe to study diabetes because it was really high in that community. And they actually live on the bottom of one of the canyons in Arizona. So they're pretty remote. They have to really, take a helicopter or walk out or go by, horse or mule to get out of the canyon. But that's just where they're from, right? That's where they live, and they know how to, live in that area because they've been doing it for centuries. So in 1989, the diabetes research study got off the ground. There was written consent to study the course of the behavioral and medical disorders, but that's what the written consent had said. But verbally, the researchers were saying, we want to study diabetes in your community. Do you agree? And there was some miscommunication as far as what the tribe understood. The tribe understood it as, we want to study diabetes and figure out what's going on in our community. But for them, when they signed documents, when they said, okay, the researchers were like, hey, we're just going to make it a broad consent, and then we're going to study some other stuff without really informing the community. And of course, again, in this situation, they did not go back to the community right away after they realized they didn't find anything. They started going into other areas of research, such as studying schizophrenia, inbreeding, population migration. And then actually an individual who's from the Havasupai tribe was going to school at ASU, went to a presentation, saw that this individual was doing a presentation about the Havasupai tribe, and it was talking about all these things, and realized like, hey, did you get our consent to study all these things that you're presenting about right now? And so that's what led to the tribe suing the university. And of course it was settled out of court. This led to a huge mistrust in the research community, but the tribe was able to get some kind of monetary compensation. They did get their samples back. They did get some, scholarships. They did get a clinic and school and things like that. So there were some things that were given to them in place of, them misusing their DNA and their samples. So this is a lot of the foundation for kind of where I'm at right now in my career and in my life. I published this review paper with a bunch of Navajo researchers, Weaving the Strands of Life, Inapitol, History of Genetic Research Involving Navajo People. And this is publicly available online. It was published in 2019. And this really stemmed from figuring out what it is that I want to do as far as studying genetics, How do I combine that with my culture, because I was raised in a traditional household? Um, and it and so the Havasupai tribe case and all that really led to this foundation of this paper, but also realizing that the Navajo Nation has a moratorium or a ban on genetics research. And so this ban has been in place since 2002. Now, mind you, this is for genetic research only, and this does not involve clinical research. And this ban, I'll just read it here. So, approving a moratorium on genetics research studies conducted within the jurisdiction of the Navajo Nation until such time that a Navajo Nation Human Research Code has been amended by the Navajo Nation Council. And so they put this in place, and a lot of the genetics research was really coming up at that time, and they didn't really feel comfortable saying okay to research on the Navajo Nation. We do have an institutional review board, and they were not comfortable moving forward with genomics research. And this was also put in place because of other input from Western researchers, from traditional healers, from people from the Human Services Committee, tribal leaders, political figures, and everybody was kind of in agreement, like, we need a policy in place, we need some rules and regulations for genomics researchers in order to do some genetics research with our people. But also there's this huge pushback of our cultural views, which is DNA is sacred. You should not be messing with your DNA and genetics, because that's something that's sacred, that's been given to you. You were born with that. So why mess with that? Why study that? Like, why is that important? So that led to some of the, putting some of that information into this paper. And we looked at 408 articles. We excluded 329. We included 79 articles in our analysis in this review paper. We saw a lot of papers that were grouped into forensics, human leukocyte antigen type studies, blood studies, complex diseases, bacterial and viruses, population genetics and migration, and hereditary disorders. And so all of these studies included Navajo people, and they ranged from, let me move this slide forward, they ranged from 1925, published way back then, to 2018 when we completed our review. And you can see here that all other studies kind of increased right here just before the moratorium, what was established in 2002. You have bacterial and viral studies, which are this darker, pink right here, and actually increased after the moratorium. Blood HLS studies has been kind of in and out. Not a lot of people were studying that, but it was really interesting to know that a lot of studies really ramped up as far as genomics research just before the moratorium. The moratorium really kind of put a stop to a lot of studies doing a lot of different, human research. And so what's involved in this paper as well is talking about our cultural practices. There have been researchers who talked about genomics research in a lot of these articles, but they don't talk about the Navajo perspective. They don't include anything about our clanship, our understanding of how we got to where we are, and how we're related to the tribes around us, or just what we do and how we understand genomics, that inaklo, right, that life strand that we understand as Navajo people. My grandmother was a professional rug weaver. That's what she did for her as a living. And she raised sheep, right? And so we understand genetics in that way, where we have certain sheep with different texture, wool, color, length, and all those different things, and weaving it, spooling it together to make, wool of different colors and things like that, and using plants and to dye these wool and create rugs. And this is actually my aunt who created this rug here. And then our complex clan system, which is what I just talked about in the beginning, it's passed on matrilineally. So my first clan is my mother's clan. My second clan comes from my dad. My third clan comes from my maternal grandfather. And then the next clan comes from my paternal grandfather. So this whole complex system, we already kind of understood genetics, but that was not included in these publications that we were reading. And so we made some further inferences that there were not a lot of tribal or academic approvals, right? Like now today we have to say was approved by whatever such and such university, or includes tribal research review, which you should all be doing, going to the tribe, asking for permission. A lot of them have institutional review boards, like formal ones, but also some of them may just have like a council put together. A lot of them maybe have like just a group that gets together quarterly to talk about research. Maybe they go through the university system to make approvals. And a lot of them were done by non-Indigenous researchers, with the exception of some of the bacterial and virus studies. And then a lot of them had small sample sizes. So I think today research, you need a lot of samples for the most part to really kind of get inference of like, hey, this gene definitely causes, whatever disease. But back then they were only saying like, oh, this one family had, a cancer of some sort, and said, okay, now all Navajos have it, or, had this specific hereditary issue. And we only looked at 2 families, but this is what Navajos have. And so it was really disheartening to see that there was all these kinds of concrete conclusions about who we are as Navajo people, without really, doing more an extensive study and being more comprehensive and asking the people, why do you think you have this condition, and, doing some more studies on top of just saying, oh, we did this DNA sequencing, and so this is what it is. I think technology has really sped up in the last few years. So obviously way back in the 1920s, we didn't have a lot of technology to kind of do these kinds of studies. But I think if we go back to that now, is that the same case? Like, was the paper, onto something, or were they just completely off? And then also there's this exclusion of our perspectives about Hajon and holistic healing. There's this idea in Navajo culture that you should be balanced emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, taking care of your physical health, taking care of yourself mentally and spiritually. And that wasn't included in any of the papers talking about like maybe there's an imbalance in the way of our lives, our living, right? Kind of like social determinants of health, if you could say. And then also the long walk gave rise to genetic bottleneck, but other cultural and social influences could or should be considered as well, and not just the long walk where we were transported from one part of Arizona into New Mexico, and a lot of us, a lot of my ancestors passed away on that long walk. It was like a 500-mile walk. Barely any food, water, barely any clothing. We were walking through the winter months, and a lot of them died in that process. But thankfully, a group of them survived and were able to get a treaty together to go back home, to go back to our homelands. And that's where we are now. And so we are really strong people, and really have a huge, deep-rooted, cultural and linguistic foundation in our community. And I think that's something to be celebrated, and not something where we just kind of come in and use genomics as a way of like continuing to belittle us, because we are strong people and we have a lot of beneficial things within our community that we should be strengthening even more. And then we kind of say, well, we need to include more Dine researchers or scientists into these research studies, because if it's going to be about Navajo people, then it should be including Dine scientists. And hopefully I'll be able to get to that point. But first, as I mentioned, we have that ban on genomics research, right? So I'm a part of this Navajo Nation Genetics Policy Development Working Group. I know it's a long name, but we were established in 2018, and we've been meeting consistently. The pandemic, we took a couple of years off just to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families, just trying to, navigate that whole thing. But we're kind of ramping up again, meeting again, talking about developing a policy, drafting the policy, figuring out what it is that we want to include in this policy. And so that's really our mission, is to gather together, bring together all kinds of stakeholders, from traditional healers to political leaders to people who work in different sectors of the Navajo Nation. So tribal offices, the Navajo Epidemiology Center, Navajo Health Center. So all these different people coming together. And then obviously the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board, to really kind of drive the process and really provide input, because some of the members from the Navajo Nation IRB were there when the ban was put into place. So they were the ones who put it in place and were a part of that process. And now today they're they're open to figuring out how can we move forward and including genomics research in our community. I just want to check on time. Okay, so this next paper I wanted to talk about, I think hopefully many of you have read this paper. It's in Nature Communications, and it's a framework for enhancing ethical genomics research with Indigenous communities. So I think there was some talk about, individuals not knowing how we should move forward and doing genomics research with Native people. So this paper can give you some insights into ethical guidelines for conducting or planning to conduct genomics research with Native people. And so this graph here, this figure really kind of sums up what's, the heart of the paper, and that is understanding we have sovereign rights and that we have research regulations in place. Even if we're a super small community to one of the largest communities like Cherokee or Navajo Nation, we have some kind of research oversight in place. And if there is none, you should not just be moving forward with the research. You should seek out individuals, create an advisory board within your research protocol to say, hey, we would like to have some kind of oversight and representation from the community, even if it's not a formal, IRB document that says, hey, this is approved, but really doing your due diligence to create an advisory board. And then community engagement is also really important. So understanding our research rules and regulations, collaborating with partners, community as partners and not subjects. So making sure that they're really equal in the process. I know that there's some community members who are kind of hesitant to work with researchers, hesitant to work with medical doctors because they may be kind of scared of the whole like power imbalances, but you should be willing to get rid of those power imbalances and really work on the same level, really work together to develop protocols, really work together to figure out what is the research question, what are the hypotheses from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, and really just dismantle all those power structures. So many of you may go to a meeting and say, hey, I'm such and such, I'm an MD at university of whatever, and I do this, right? And then you stop there. Well, where are you from? Where did you come from? Who is your family? Like, do you have a family? Did you come from the East Coast? Did you, live internationally? Like, what was your upbringing like? That really brings the community together and actually opens up that dialogue to say, you're willing to talk about who you are as an individual and not talk about what you do as an individual. And I think that speaks volumes for engaging Native people in general. And so build cultural competencies. So listen and learn from the community and try to understand the culture, the language, current history, and traditional ways of knowing, and respecting that a lot of times maybe you shouldn't be in the room if there's some, cultural things that need to be discussed, and be okay with that. So remove yourself from that equation. But also if you're in the room, making sure that the Native voices are leading the charge and not your voice if you're non-Native and you're not from that community. And integrate science with community values. And that's one way that if you build that cultural competency or humility or cultural safety or awareness, I've heard it, many different ways, you can really build a robust science like protocol if you really listen to the community. And also just kind of doing your due diligence to like read books, to continue to learn from maybe the scientific literature. There's a lot of Native researchers who are coming out with really great articles today, more than ever, I feel like. And so those you should be reading, looking at, and just asking, like, if you don't know, and if you feel like I don't know where to start, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to act in this instance, then ask. It's always better to ask than to do something that's disrespectful. And then everybody's like, oh, they don't know, or they don't respect us. And they, just want to do whatever they usually do within the Western culture. And they don't respect, who we are, and they don't want to take the lead from us, right? So ask if you don't know. Transparency is one of those big things, making goals and work with community to develop the goals and hypotheses, and do not over promise outcomes of the research. So don't say, oh, at the end of this, we're gonna find a gene for diabetes research. It's okay to be optimistic, but don't say this is what we're gonna find. And also just kind of be like, hey, just be realistic. I'm willing to work with you for the next 15 years or so. and we probably won't find anything at the end of 15 years, but I'm willing to build this foundation of how we go about genomics research, how we do, health research and biomedical research in general. So just being transparent about that, and just knowing that, not everybody knows everything. So being transparent about that as well. Build tribal capacity, involve and train community members to be a part of the research protocols, to be a part of the research initiatives, to be in the lab. There's a lot of Native students out there. There's a lot of Native organizations trying to get Native students into the lab, give them these opportunities, and build the capacity within and bring them in. Don't just bring your own team and say, oh, this is my team, we're going to do it right, we're going to do it well, we're going to, it's going to be a really great, efficient process. Okay, that's fine, but you're not involving the community. And a lot of them are super smart. We may be quiet, we may be timid in the beginning, and we may not know the ins and outs of academia and things like that. But I think that's your charge as, a PI or a mentor or an individual who's just older, right? Is just to guide the next generation into science, and then disseminate, right? Which is a huge thing that I've been hearing across the board from Native communities. We don't get the results back. We don't hear back from the researcher. We don't know what happened with that study after we approved it. So work with the community on how to present that research. And maybe the IRB at the tribal level, maybe they have venues, right? Like agency council meetings, or different committee meetings, or just whatever, like, maybe an event like a powwow or something, have a booth at the powwow, have a booth at a community event, health fair, or things like that, to get the word out, have a brochure, and maybe think about, converting some of your material into the native language. Get somebody involved as far as, like, maybe there's an artist within the community who can make your pamphlets or, your newsletters and things like that, and incorporate, the designs and things like that of the local community. And then just really, the advisory board will also be able to help you if you create that, which you should. They'll be able to help you disseminate, figure out ways to get on the agenda for different meetings, and figure out who's the best person to disseminate something, maybe in the healthcare system, or maybe at an elders council or something like that, where maybe you're not welcome, but maybe somebody else can advocate on your behalf at those meetings. And then, of course, respect, equity, beneficence, and reciprocity intertwine throughout those 6 principles. And I guess I just want to end on a personal note. I do have additional slides, but this is kind of where I've been thinking, what I've been thinking about recently, and kind of just wanted to move towards, is that we are more than just our base pairs. This is my grandmother, who lived out on the Navajo Nation in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. It's a rural town. She passed away about 20 years or so ago, and she had cancer, and she passed away from that. It was a stomach cancer. But prior to that, she had 6 kids. She had a husband who passed away suddenly when her oldest child was in their teen years. She raised 6 kids pretty much on her own. She had to haul water. She had to go to a store that was over the mountain, to get groceries. And that was the closest grocery store. A lot of times where the water had to be taken from was, like 5 miles away, 6 miles away, depending on where it needed to be. She had sheep, she had horses, she had cattle, she had, of course, cats and dogs. And so the sheep and cattle and horses, they had and her kids to help her do that. She also planted, watermelon, corn, squash, anything you can think of. And she did that, and she created a whole big field, and she shared that with her relative, with her cousin who was next door. And so she created a huge community for her kids to do those things, because the grocery store was 20 miles down the road. And even then, it wasn't super reliable. The vehicles weren't. And she grew up in an era where we were still using wagons and things like that. And she didn't really necessarily have a proper education. She didn't really go through like K through 12 school. She did end up going to boarding school, where she learned a lot of trade skills, like cooking and sewing and cleaning and things like that. And so she did some of that work. But when you're on the reservation, you have to plant your own foods, you have to take care of your own animals, and then some of those animals can be utilized for meat. And she would always be, butchering a sheep for special occasions. And she, engaged her children and obviously me as her grandchild in traditional ceremonies, and ceremonies that take all night, ceremonies that take 4 days. She would constantly be involved in the community to help out when somebody had a ceremony going. And so I just bring this up to say that we are more than just our base pairs and our DNA sequences. There are a lot of other additional factors that go into why our health is so poor on, reservations or within Native communities. And her first language is Navajo. She barely spoke any English. She didn't really say much to me because I was raised to speak English. There was that disconnect, like, oh, Navajo language, don't speak that, you're not going to do well in the Western education. And she wanted the best for her grandkids. And so she spoke English to me as much as she could. But my mother, she's fluent in Navajo, but she also thought, hey, like, I want you to go out and succeed and do well for for yourself, but also bring back your skills and education back to our community. And so English should be your first language and something that we should be teaching you. And Navajo should be on the back burner. And I get upset with my family sometimes because I'm like, I could have done both. I could have done Navajo and English. But this is kind of the thinking that has changed over the years for a lot of different families. And the current generation is losing the language, losing that value of the language. And I know that you guys may know the code talkers and how we helped the US win the war with our language. And it's so disheartening to know that we should be ashamed of our language and not use that as a strength for our people. And so I also mentioned that my grandmother was a professional rug weaver. And so she would weave these big rugs that she would sell at museums, and, small rugs, medium rugs, and she would take pictures of them all the time and she would sell them. And I don't know where those rugs are now. And she would sell them for maybe a few $100s, but then I'm sure the museum would turn around and sell them for thousands of dollars. And she put all her time and energy into weaving rugs. Sometimes she would spend all night weaving a rug just so she could take it to the store the next day. Take it to the store so she can get money, and then she can feed her family. She can and she was able to sew. She sewed the clothes for her kids when they went to school, and she drove herself everywhere, right? She did pretty much everything, and all the while having diabetes, having cancer, having a cancer growing within her body. And the doctor saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, she probably couldn't get to the doctor's office in the timely manner that they needed her to do that. The Indian Health Service doesn't have a lot of specialized treatment on the reservation. So she has to go and drive like 300-400 miles just to get to some kind of cancer specialist. And, who's going to take care of the animals when she leaves? Who's going to take care of the kids when she leaves? Who's going to take care of the crops when she leaves? So there's all these different things that are going on. And then, of course, the built environment. It's really harsh to live on the reservation if you don't have running water or if you don't have electricity, which is some things that we have currently now at my grandmother's place. But we didn't have that back then when I was growing up. We didn't have showers where I could spend 20 minutes in the shower, like just kind of meandering and like hanging out. No, like I had to take a sponge bath, or I just had to wash my hair, and that's it. I couldn't do anything else. And of course, the healthcare access and quality of care is pretty much poor, I would say. There's a lot of non-natives who just go to the IHS just to get loan repayments. There are plenty of doctors and clinicians and people who work in the healthcare system that are great. They'll stay there for years and years, and they'll create, this really great rapport with people, but there's huge turnover. I remember shadowing within the IHS system, and there was this grandmother who didn't come in for her medication because she knew that her doctor left. that doctor had left and she didn't want to make a new connection with the new doctor. And she hesitated and waited until the very last minute. So it's like, you know, that trust and that trust responsibility you have as a clinician, as a researcher, as whatever position you're in, it's really important to take the time to come into a new community and take the time to talk to them, take the time to just build up that rapport with the individual and learn the culture and language in which you are going into. And yeah, so this is kind of, you know, my grandmother and just kind of who she was. And she was a great individual, but unfortunately she passed away when I was in high school. And she's just that person, you know, that would do everything for you and do anything for you and would do, you know, whatever was needed and stay up all night if it was, you know, needed, and make those comfort foods and make those foods that you want to eat during the holidays, right? And she would do that, and she didn't ask for help. She just did it because she loved, you know, her family. And that is the strength that I kind of want to highlight. And that's what's important to me, and that's why I do what I do. And I hope that you guys also feel that love and strength and just kind of get that inspiration from these photos. And just to say that genomics research should be done by us and for us as Native individuals. And this is a photo that was taken for this Washington Post article that I was in. And it's just to say that I'm the next generation, and then, you know, I'll pass on what I know and what I've learned. And hopefully, you know, our health will improve as years go on. And so I just want to conclude just briefly that, you know, there's this summer internship for Indigenous peoples and genomics that I'm a part of. It's every summer, a week-long workshop where we teach about genomics, do different lab activities. We talk about the ethical considerations in doing genomics research with their communities or just in general. And we just kind of provide this safe space for Native students to talk about genomics and what it means for their people. And we've had community members who come from maybe their political organization on the reservation. Maybe they're a student who's, you know, a bachelor's degree or a postdoc or graduate student or who's an MD. And now we've gone international. Now we have Sing Aotearoa from New Zealand. We have Sing Canada. We have Sing Australia. And now we're going to have Sing Mexico up and coming. And then I also heard there's a Sing Chile as well. So it's just really great to be a part of this huge movement where a lot of Native people are realizing the benefits of genomics, but also integrating that with who we are as individuals, and know that DNA is sacred and DNA is kind of the foundation of who we are as human beings, but who we are as Native people. So this is just a little summary of the workshop. And these are the photos that I took in the workshops and were published in different articles. And this is a conference that we actually put together in 2020. And it was just before the pandemic, like literally like 2 months before everything shut down. We met up in New Zealand, and these people come from all over the world, all Native researchers, clinicians, people who work with Native communities, and just coming together to talk about where do we see genomics research going, and what are the ethical principles that we want to put in place, and just, you know, have fun and laugh and just kind of bring all of our personalities together and learn from one another. And that, you know, Native people are not just brown and look like, you know, what you see in movies or whatever, but they come from all different regions. They are all different shapes and sizes and colors. And we all have this, you know, strong foundation to who we are. And hopefully we're going to move that needle just a little bit more. And I just want to say a hihet, thank you all for listening. And this is my Twitter handle, but also just if you want additional information and you want to hear me talk some more, you can, you know, look at this, listen to this podcast that was published in October of 2021 last year. Actually, it's been a year. I didn't realize, but I did a podcast interview with the Experiment or at the Atlantic. And then also I had a Washington Post article come out in November of 2020, and it's called A Geneticist's Dilemma. And I was on the cover of the Washington Post, which was really interesting. I didn't realize I was going to be, but I just really appreciate all your time, and I really appreciate the organizers of this. And I just want to say thank you, and I'll just take any questions now.
All right, thank you so much, Renee, for sharing your story there at the end. I think that was really awesome to highlight, I guess, your background and why you're interested in doing the work that you do, and then sharing your grandmother's story there. There are a lot of thank yous in the chats and people acknowledging your efforts, and just thought it was a really great presentation. Just looking through to see if we have any questions here. We got three. Were you able to see anything earlier?
Nothing came through the chat, but there's a question here about Navajo language within the Q&A portion that Margaret asked. She's just wondering, do you know or can you still learn the Navajo language? So kind of more of a language-based question for you, Renee.
Yeah. Of course, this is something I can do. There are a lot of Navajo grammar and linguistic books out there. There are a lot of Navajo classes. However, they're more located in Arizona, which is where I'm not currently at. My family does speak fluent Navajo. However, every time they see me, they want to speak English. I do know certain words, basics, but I should say that I'm also working with the Navajo language group to create a genomics glossary for understanding genomics terms. So things such as chromosome, genotype, phenotype, PCR, things like that. So I've been kind of helping them develop the glossary. I've obviously been doing the English part of it, but also what was really interesting about that is that, you know, if I just got a definition from online, for example, or a book about genotype, and it was just, you know, long sentence or a huge paragraph about PCR, the glossary team would be like, what are you trying to say? Because this is too long, right? The Navajo language is not going to translate very well with this huge long paragraph, especially because this glossary should be, you know, succinct. And so I was like, oh my God, like I really have to think really hard about what am I trying to say about PCR? What am I trying to say about genotype? And I had to really think about what are the, you know, important English words that I can use to put together maybe one sentence about this term. And the Navajo translators are like, okay, and they built out this whole paragraph. So it's been really great to work with them, to learn, to listen to what they have to say and do it in Navajo. And so I think that's one way that I'm trying to integrate myself back into the language and the culture. And I'll obviously help them with technology because we meet over Zoom and things like that, and helping to build out that workbook, and that I think we're probably going to roll that out in spring of next year and make that available freely to people. So just kind of keep a lookout for that. So I'm really excited for that up and coming project.
Renee, kind of quick follow-up question there. It is hard to learn language like from a distance. So are they creating like neologisms? Are they making new words within the Dine language for these genomic terms, or are they just finding ways to modify translation?
It's more like descriptive. So Navajo language is more descriptive. So it's more like, okay, what word can we insert there to describe what you're saying about, like, oh, making multiple copies of something. So how would you describe that? And so using current Navajo terminology to be more descriptive of what that is. However, I do know that the word DNA, so inapitol, which is the life strand, which was kind of coined back in early 2000s. And so that I would say is a new term. Cool. And it's descriptive, right? It's the life strand. It's not like, oh, DNA, it's not sequence. It's really cool to hear all those.
Well, it's awesome to hear that they're working in that way. Now you're able to contribute to the language in that way.
There was a hand raised earlier from Cassandra, I believe.
Yeah, hi. I didn't join from the beginning, but thank you for taking my question and well, just listening. Anyways, Renee, how exciting the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing. And what is your clan again?
Twitsohni.
Twitsohni and
Nishrink Ashche Bashichin Tachini Dashiche Kiani Nashanala.
Okay, I think Tachini and Hadalahni are related. But I'm Nakaidina, born for Puerto Rican, and then Kanagani Idashichedo Nakaidashinella. So I just wanted to thank you. And then is there a way to get involved in the group that you're working with on the glossary? That's one. And then the other is if I was, and I am interested in maybe proposing a type of research project. I mean, and I'm just a person. How do I go about doing something like that?
So a research project related to genetics or just in general?
In general.
Okay. I guess it depends on the tribe or the group that you're trying to work with.
It would be Navajo, and it would be specifically people in the Western agency that were affected by the forced relocation.
Yeah, so I would start with trying to figure out who could be a liaison from that region, but also reaching or looking at the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board website.
Okay.
They have a whole document for the researchers to fill in, to figure out what their aims, hypotheses are. Have you engaged with different agency councils, chapter councils, and getting resolutions from those individuals or those organizations? And so it's kind of outlined in the Navajo IRB. If you just Google Navajo IRB website, you can find that document for researchers and kind of figure out where you need to start, but really getting resolutions from those agencies and chapter houses and finding key maybe Navajo researchers, maybe your organization has some people as well, and just kind of building support letters to say like everybody's on board with this project and it's important.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then the glossary, we kind of have our group already kind of ironed out right now. We have expert reviewers looking at the glossary. We have our core group already, but we will be putting that up on our website, which I'm responsible for as well. So hopefully that'll come early spring as well for the website. So I think we'd be open to additional edits, because I think I want the glossary to be a living document, not just kind of stagnant where, okay, we did all the terms and then we're done. Is there additional things that we want to add, additional terms or, things like that, or maybe there's different ways of describing the terms as well. So
well,
look out for that.
I've been involved with that, the Navajo wellness model that came out of Chinle Service Unit. And that is pretty much what it's turned into, a living document. So those of us that had worked on that following the initial creators, Ursula Noki Wilson, maybe a bunch of different people, but yeah, that's definitely turned out to be a living document. Oh, and then the one thing I wanted to ask you before time runs out, but where can I listen to you some more?
Oh, yeah. So I'll just put my thing up again.
And thank you so much for all your work and your knowledge, Njone.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah. So this is the Atlantic. So if you go and Google what does it mean to give away your DNA, or even just my name and podcasts, you'll be able to find it. It's like on YouTube, Spotify. And then this one is also, it could be behind a paywall with Washington Post, but I think, it's available, freely available.
So there's a couple more questions and then one comment that I wanted to highlight. But one from John Tilbert, for other native learners or young professionals, I'm wondering about your work. What about your work you like, what you didn't know at the beginning that you know now, and what you would like, what you would encourage talented students to explore as they think about getting involved in health-related work?
I think it's just kind of diving into any opportunity. There's tons of summer programs that are available at different universities. There's also, tribal, summer research programs as well. I would just say have them apply to those programs, because I think that's one of the ways that I got into research, was just saying, oh, can I do research? Is research for me? And I just was at the University of Arizona and I just applied. I didn't know anything about it. I just figured, well, they're going to mentor me. They're going to pay me. I'm going to be doing something related to science because I was already doing a biology degree. So I thought, why not? Right. So I just kind of went in 2 feet in and applied, and I got it. And then from there, I just realized there's this whole nother world of academia, medical research, biomedical research. And I would just encourage researchers to kind of just, look for those opportunities and apply. Even if you don't self-select out, if you feel like you don't meet the criteria, email them, ask them, hey, can I apply? Like, I really am interested. And I just kind of did it. And I even eventually went to France to do some research. And that's actually was 10 years ago, this past summer, where I went to France and did research with a France institution and did some lab work and was able to go to Paris and, was all paid for. And it was through my university to get that opportunity. So just kind of look around for those opportunities and dive into that. I forget what the other questions were that you asked me.
Oh, here we go. What you didn't know at the beginning that you know now?
That science is hard, that academia is hard, it's difficult. I would say that it's not a super supportive environment, and I can see why there's not a lot of Native faculty, principal investigators, people who have PhDs, because there's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of social barriers that you have to get through. I feel like I was thinking, oh, it's going to be super supportive and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to mentor me and people who are going to be inclusive, but you really have to work really hard to make a name for yourself, work really hard to, be counted. And then a lot of, it's negative connotations towards you if you don't have a PhD, if you don't have an MD. But I would say do what's in your heart. Do what you feel is necessary for what you want to accomplish in life. It doesn't matter if you have the PhD or the MD or nursing degree. You'll eventually get there if that's what you really want. But I think it's important to do what you love and important to do what's right and what's in your heart. And where I'm kind of in that vein of, everything happens for a reason, right? And for me, what guides me is my traditional ways, right? Prayers and songs and things like that, and leaning on my family for guidance and advice, and just really utilizing that and saying, is this where I'm meant to be? I really reflect on a lot of presentations that I do. Example, this one, what is it that I want to convey? What am I feeling today? And today I really wanted to talk about my grandmother. I haven't talked about her at all, even in these, articles and things like that. I mention her, but I haven't put a picture up to say, this is what she's lived through. And for some reason, I just felt like I needed to say that. So I needed to tell that story. So I would just say, researchers can be, supportive, but there's also that realm of like, it's really competitive. So lean on those people who are your supporters and those people who will support you no matter what, and lean on those universities and mentors and people like that who are willing to get you to where you want to be in life. It's important to go to the top university or, whatever, but you should go to that place that you're supported, that you feel like where you feel like you can offer what you have to give. So I would say that.
Well, that was a great couple of questions by Dr. Tilbert there. One question came up in the chat, which I think was answered. And then one more comment. So I'll get to the comment first because we're running out of time. Dr. Rusk is a physician provider that is down now on the Arizona campus at Mayo, and she's interested in doing Indigenous health equity research and would love to connect. So she dropped that in the chat. Wanted to highlight that for you. And then Stephen Whitehorn asked if there's a coalition of Native researchers, which was answered within the Q&A that there's the Native Research Network, but is there any other networks that either you're a part of that are similar or anything else that you want to highlight there?
I would say the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, ACES is what they're called. There's SACNIS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. So you can find all these Native researchers at those conferences and make connections and networks. And it's really fun. Actually, the SACNIS conference is next week in Puerto Rico. So that's where I'm going to be. So I'm really excited to go there. Let's see, other researchers. I would say Facebook is a huge connector as well. And I would say just figuring out where those native webinars and series are happening, right? Like what Mayo's doing, because that's where you're going to learn where a lot of natives are headed as far as their research. But also look up the SING Consortium, which is has a website. It's called SING Consortium. And that's where you can find out where all our SING groups are. And we have past participants and like our little like agendas from past years, and maybe reaching out to the organizers of SING. I'm a part of that, but also there's many other people that are part of that organization, and it's specific to genomics. So that's another way you can kind of reach out and find that community as well. Yes, SING Consortium. Yep. CONSORTIUM.
Then we're over, but one really great question just came in here, and so I wanted to give you a chance to discuss. But sometimes it may take years to have deliverable data to participants. How the study team can keep the community engaged between the time the samples are of sample collection and when the results are ready to be given to the community. So how do you keep up community engagement between the data collection piece and the reporting out?
I would say, are there small deliverables that you can do? For example, like a little newsletter. Maybe you can do something with social media where you can kind of introduce the research team in the process, attend community events, whether that's a powwow, whether that's like a gathering, like a fair or a health fair, or just kind of make your kind of be there in the presence of the community instead of just kind of being like, oh, I'm going to be at the university. In the meantime, the results will be here in 10 years. That's not good engagement. Maybe creating a social media platform, doing newsletters, just kind of updating the community, maybe having something smaller do outs on top of having that longer term project. So maybe doing some health education, maybe involving like, an MD in your project, and then you can do like a health fair of some sort, do booths at these community events. So I don't know. I just feel like it depends on your topic, but I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we have Google nowadays. So you can probably Google some things that you can do with the community, and maybe just have like little retreats, like here and there, like, hey, we're going to do a retreat every other year. We're going to bring everybody together, just kind of update people on how things are going, do something fun, go out and like maybe have somebody from the community, say, hey, pick a place that we can all go. We can, have dinner at some place or have certain foods, or maybe we can go on a hike and just do something among, just be human, come together and just do something fun as well, just to continue that relationship and to learn from one another, and obviously continue to recruit students from the community and bring them on, and maybe do a talk at the local tribal college, and maybe that'll spark some interest from Native students to come onto your project. And so there's all these different ways, I think.
All right, well, thank you again, Rene, for your time today, and I was so happy that you were able to join us and talk about this really great topic, and also for the feedback and suggestions on how to stay engaged with our communities when we are doing research with them. So thank you again, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. And please, everybody that is still on, if you can complete our short survey to provide feedback on this speaker series, that'll be really helpful. And also, just want to let you all know that our next speaker will be in person in Rochester, and also we'll have a virtual webinar option on November 17th. So thank you all again, and we will see you all next time.